Hello and welcome to the ILO's Future of Work podcast. I'm Sophie Fisher. This time we're looking at something you may regard as an art form, but is also a job, albeit a very different one. The world of the professional dancer. The career of a professional dancer is precarious. They need to train intensively when young, when many of us are studying to get academic or technical qualifications. Then their professional performance careers are comparatively short, perhaps into their mid-30s or maybe their 40s. And that assumes it isn't all ended early and suddenly by an accident or an injury. So what happens to dancers when they have to stop performing? What's it like to have a career that relies so heavily on the physical ability of youth? With me today is Jennifer Curry, who is Executive Director of Dancers Career Development. DCD is a non-profit organisation that helps all kinds of professional dancers plan career changes. And we also have William Bracewell. William is a principal dancer with the Royal Ballet Company in London. He started dancing as a child and has won multiple awards. This season he will be on stage at the Royal Opera House in London, dancing leading roles in some of their most important productions. William and Jennifer, welcome to you both, and thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
It's lovely to be here.
William, first of all, when did you start dancing as a child, and when did you realise that this might actually be a professional career and not just something you enjoyed doing?
Yeah, of course. So I started ballet training when I was 9 years old in Swansea, which wasn't the most popular choice of after-school activity. I was, the only boy in my class. But there was something about it that just really intrigued me. If you, cut forward to the age of 13, I was lucky enough to get into the Royal Ballet School at the age of 11. So I moved away from home, which was a big change. But yeah, I think it was around the age of 13, I realized that this potentially could be a job. There was a lot of work to do to get to a point to achieve the things that I was seeing professional dancers doing on stage, and to be able to not just the physical side of what I needed to do with my body, but in terms of, the way I needed to emotionally act and be able to tell stories in the way that I was so captured in performances that I'd seen.
Age 13 is when a lot of kids are basically starting their serious academic work. Mm-hmm. Ballet takes hours and hours of training and practice. How do you balance at that age, or perhaps you can't balance at that age, the academic requirements with the ballet requirements? I mean, do you have to compromise on the academics?
Well, interestingly, I would say both of my sisters were just very much more innately academic than I was. But because I went to the Royal Ballet School, which had much smaller class sizes, we got, I think, more attention and more catering to us individually in our academic studies. So I ended up at the age of 16 with coming out with better grades than my sisters had, even though they were, even acknowledged by my mum, they were generally more academic than I was. And although I had the equivalent of a degree from my dance training, that was something both my sisters went on to formally study in. So, I would say the school did a brilliant job at providing us with both of these academic skills and incredible dance skills. That is to say, it was a really, really difficult and grueling schedule. I look back at it now and I don't think I could do it as an adult.
Tell us about the day. Tell us about an average day.
So average day would be probably 7:30 up, 8:15. You'd already be in registration, ready for your first set of classes until around 10:30. Then you'd have ballet class till lunch. Then you'd have another set of academic studies after lunch. Then you would have an afternoon of it would alternate either academics or dancing. And then you'd have more dancing in the evening till around 5:36. Then it would be dinner, and then you'd have another hour of homework time in the evening, and that was Monday to Friday, and then there would be supplementary classes on a Saturday. So it was, it was a lot of work, but I do generally think, it's afforded me this career that I absolutely love now.
And let's spool forward a little bit, and now you are a very well established professional dancer at the Royal Opera House with the Royal Ballet Company. I hope this is not an inappropriate question, but how long do you expect to be able to keep that up?
No, not at all. It's one of the things that I think DCD are brilliant at, is in the most kind way possible, they help you realize that this career, it will definitely end at some point. I mean, I would be, if I made it to 40, I would be thrilled. If it was before then that would be great as well. I had an incident where I had to have back surgery about 3 or 4 years ago, and that there was a time during that process where I did think I would potentially not dance again. So I've sort of worked through some of the psychology of what that's like to have it taken away potentially prematurely.
I mean, that's one of the sort of shocking things about dancing. Looking on the internet, I've seen that the injury rate is comparable to football or wrestling, and literally you could go on stage, an ankle could turn the wrong way, and that's it. I mean, has that happened to some of your colleagues?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have known a handful of people that have had such serious injuries that they weren't able to make it back to dancing. But it's rare that people don't make it back at all, but it does unfortunately happen.
Jennifer, let me bring you in here. I mean, William basically had the best training available possibly, at White Lodge, the Royal Ballet Company's junior school. And he got very good academic training as well as ballet training. But you deal with dancers from all kinds of backgrounds. Is this common, or do you find that some of them have had to compromise on other qualifications to get on in their dance profession?
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think it really depends, excuse me, on the individual dancer. I think what we're seeing now is a real culture change within the industry. I think there's much more emphasis now on dancers as individual human beings. So therefore, the thinking about dancers as the sort of whole self, and thinking about a long-term career and what that might look like. So I think we're seeing some really positive changes within training institutions. But you're absolutely right in that the dedication, the time, the focus, the commitment that is required to train to the highest level within dance to enable a professional career can sometimes, not always, but can sometimes mean that academic qualifications can fall less sort of down the priority list. But also I think it's around, what other things do young dancers might have to sacrifice to reach that professional level. We know that dancers are in training often surrounded by other dancers. And so what we do at DCD, particularly through our work with students, is to encourage the students to think about themselves, yes, as dancers, but also as individuals, to consider, themselves in the wider world, and actually how considering yourself within the wider world can actually contribute to your performance career.
And William, does anybody ever talk to you, or did anybody ever talk to you or your colleagues about things like health and injury insurance, pensions, stuff like that?
I mean, yeah, we have an amazing healthcare team. We did at the school, and more so in the company. And especially going through a big injury, I learned so much about my health, my general health, the psychology of my performance career. I've got a pension, if you're happy to know. There's a pension. I mean, that we're encouraged to obviously pay into our pension scheme, because we will most definitely need it. But I do have to say that, Jennifer, that when I first experienced DCD, when I was at Birmingham Royal Ballet for 7 years, that was probably the first time that I began the conversation around contributing more so, not being quite so single-minded in my approach to dance. And I can't champion DCD enough in what they're doing to change dancers' perception of the dance world and what they are able to do on a much wider perspective. And I think DCD have been key in changing that conversation.
Jennifer, do you find, is it common among the dancers that you talk to that they have thought at all or even put in place things like insurance and pensions and so forth? I mean, what are they looking at when they finish dancing?
Again, I think it's really changing. I think, dancers that are coming through training and that are in professional companies and freelance dance artists as well are really having to think seriously about lifelong careers. I think, the COVID pandemic particularly really highlighted the precarity of a dancer's career, particularly those freelance dancers, but also, the many hundreds of dancers within companies across the UK and the world. So I think we are seeing a change. We are seeing that dancers are much more aware of the opportunities that come with thinking about career development, the opportunities now to explore different sides of who you are. And I think, the work that we do at DCD, what's so inspiring to me is that we help retain really talented, highly skilled individuals within the dance sector and within the performing arts and cultural sectors, dancers retraining as choreographers, as teachers, as lighting designers, the list goes on. But also we have dancers that move completely away from the sector and, are joining the workforce as florists, plumbers, lawyers, doctors. It's really inspiring and fascinating to me that as individuals, just with that little bit of support, actually what they can go on to achieve.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit then about the sort of transferable skills. I mean, you mentioned choreography, and that's kind of quite an obvious one. Dance teaching, that's another fairly obvious one. But, there are more dancers in the world than there are needs for choreographers. So, I mean, rather than looking at the professions, if you break down the skills that William and other dancers have, let me put this to both of you. What would you say that they are, that they could bring to any other kind of profession?
Gosh, I mean, I think there's so many. I mean, obvious ones of creativity, resilience, the work ethic, dedication, focus, flexibility, teamwork, working on your own, empathy, courage, grit, all of these skills, I think that dancers have in an abundance. And dancers, I think, have a really unique way of navigating the world. And I think what DCD are here to do is, first of all, encourage dancers to take some time to really recognize what they have and what they have to offer, but then also to match that up with potential employers and to employers to really see dancers for who they are and what they can contribute.
William, do you want to add anything to that rather impressive list of skills?
No, I think the thing that I've sort of noticed, I think, over my experience with other dancers is having gone through quite an intense period of training at a very young age, you realize working incredibly hard is very, very day to day to us. But what is amazing about the people that I work with is the variety of skills that they bring to work. And I think that's what DCD do so well, is they look at the individual and they're able to delve in and find the skills that maybe they don't actually use all that often in their dance careers, but are innately there within the individual, and they change vastly from person to person.
Yes, I mean, I suppose those would include things like memory, because you have to learn all those different roles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a day this week I rehearsed 5 different ballets in a day, and and then had a performance in the evening. So they've got, yeah, I mean, but I wouldn't particularly say my memory's brilliant, but it obviously is for dance steps, which, you know, obviously, which must be transferable in multiple ways.
Jennifer, I noticed that on the DCD website, you have an interesting tagline, which is that the first call is the hardest. Now, that implies to me that in transferring out of dance performance into other things, there's also a big psychological element.
Absolutely. I think, and William can, of course, speak better to this than I can, but I think from our perspective, we see dancers who have started thinking about, this profession, as William said earlier, from a very early age, and have had to have been very, very single-minded in order to reach the level that they are in terms of a professional career. So, it can really be absolutely terrifying for a dancer to think about what they might do when they're not performing. A dancer is absolutely who you are, and what DCD is saying is that that won't change. You will always be a dancer, but what can you add to that? What else can you offer and contribute to the world? So absolutely, it can be a terrifying thought. It can be very, very scary. And what we encourage all dancers to do, is to come to DCD and build that relationship as early as possible in their career, so that when the time does come, dancers feel prepared, they feel curious, and actually they feel excited about what else they can do. But we're very aware that it can be a very, very difficult time.
Yeah, I saw the quote from Martha Graham, the famous choreographer, which is like a dancer dies twice and the first time is the most painful. But that's pretty negative, actually, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and what DCD says is that doesn't have to happen. Of course, we acknowledge that it's a very, very difficult time, and that's why DCD exists, purely to support dancers, because it's very, very specific. But actually, let's turn that around. What are the opportunities within transition? And of course, we know that outside of dance, individuals are transitioning and moving into different careers all of the time, and individuals will now more often than not have 4 or 5 different careers and perhaps a portfolio career. So absolutely, we encourage dancers to see it as an opportunity.
William, what sort of things do you see your former colleagues going into, or your current colleagues talking about?
It really does vary hugely. I think teaching is a big one. Some choreography, some arts management. But my partner, who is a freelance performer, really did struggle during the lockdown. He obviously had no work, so retrained as a florist, and now we kind of try and grow as many of our own flowers as possible for him to use in his work. But I mean, yeah, doctors, medicine, the range is incredibly varied. Photography, yeah.
And getting wider from what Jennifer says.
Some finance, yeah.
And have you thought at all about, hopefully in the long distant future, what you might want to do after you stop performing?
I've given it a lot of thought, and I think I've fallen into the second category that Jennifer was talking about, where DCD have been there from very early on in my career. So I've started to have these conversations and have these thought processes going on for many years. And I'm not certain at all about what I want to do, but the thought of reaching that point isn't scary. I actually I sometimes get quite excited thinking about the possibilities of what I could do next. Because as much as I love ballet, it's really, really difficult. And it can take its toll. So on those days where I'm just really exhausted, I sometimes daydream about the slightly less physically grueling career that I would have after this.
Well, I do hope actually that will not be for some years to come, and we will have the pleasure of seeing you on stage for quite a long time to come. And look, that's, I'm afraid, all we have time for today. So many, many thanks to both Jennifer Curry and William Bracewell for joining us. And if you want to find out more about DCD, there is a link to their website on the website of this podcast. And if you want to see William dance, and I highly recommend that you should, you can look at the website of the Royal Ballet in London for information about cast lists. And of course, they also have global rebroadcasts of live and recorded ballet performances. So for now, let me wish you all goodbye, and I hope you will join us again soon for another edition of the ILO Future of Work podcast. Goodbye.